And I owe that great opportunity to be in the film Waking Life to Tommy Pilata, the producer of the film, and Richard Linkletter, two guys that I've gotten so busy over the years I never even get to reach out to and contact. By the way, remind me to try to call Tommy Pilata on those numbers we have again today, because the number I have for him is an old number. And Tommy called me the last time I talked to him about 3-4 months ago. I was in a UFC fight because Joe Rogan had invited me down to Houston. And, well, I was already in Houston protesting the Fed, and Joe had heard that, so he invited me over to the UFC. And Tommy called me while I was in the middle of watching the fights, and he could barely hear me, so I haven't talked to him then. I'm not name dropping. I'm like now communicating with my old friends via the radio show, because I know he listens sometimes, and his friends do. So, Tommy, I think about you all the time, and I bet he even came to Southwest. And I always miss his phone calls or don't call him back the few times he's called. So now I'll just communicate to you here. You're awesome. What a smart guy, too. He's an amazing guy. So is Rick Linkletter. That's now what this radio show has turned into, is a public communication. You know, I want to try to break the cycle here on this radio show. It's a great radio show, very informative. But I just don't want to get up here and just bray at people, calling the New World Order criminals and calling all the different systems criminal, which is true to a great extent, but we know that. I want to try to have a calm, focused, reflective show. I tried this yesterday, and it didn't happen because I got off into brain-altering vaccines that literally attack your tissue. And I dream of actually just calmly covering all the news. I dream of actually taking hundreds of your phone calls. And I've only attained that dream a few times because I'm always going in the same paradigm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the phones up for first-time callers, and at least in the first and second hour, then everybody in the third hour, on any subject, any question or comment. No matter how good the caller is, I'm giving them 1 minute. And then I'm giving myself 30 seconds to respond. We're going to be taking your phone calls. When we come back, I'll give you the number. Number one on the audio streams and podcasts for talk radio via many metrics like Shoutcast and others at Infowars.com, streaming video at PrisonPlanet.tv, and, of course, channel XM 166. Thank you so much for tuning in to this hour of Infowars. I want to do something a little bit different today, and you see me struggle with this every day because there is no program director, there is no radio consultant, there is no manager over Alex Jones. And quite frankly, some days I wish there was, just because they're there to challenge you and to bounce things off of you and to point out what could be better. Because some days I hear my radio show rebroadcast, and it is the essence of powerful information and oratory skills and the incredible guest and the breaking news. There's a reason this broadcast now reaches, one way or another, over 15 million. In fact, I've got to bump that number up. Conservatively, it's more than that. 15 million people a week. But then I realized, wow, that's an incredible responsibility. And I tend to get frustrated with the information. I tend to get angry after I read this stuff all day and all night and then finally get on air. I get angry and frustrated because there's piles of it. And I figured out, psychoanalyzing myself, that at a subconscious level, I get so frustrated and angry by the news that then I start to basically spin out of control and just get angry and nasty. And you can't argue with success. It's just that I personally want to move more towards being calm and focused and really deliberative in what I do, instead of sometimes not being as effective because I'm in a rage. I knew this was coming for a long time. They're launching all sorts of nuclear-powered satellites now that have reactors, little systems on board that if they do ever come back into orbit, or out of orbit into the atmosphere will make Chernobyl look like a health food. Now they're announcing drones to circle 24/7 that are nuclear powered. And you know they're going to crash. You know they're going to have malfunctions. It doesn't matter. The system says DU's good, Chernobyl's good, Fukushima's good. They actually say, I know I talk about this ad nauseum because it's total proof of the elite being out of their minds crazy. Radiation levels are going up everywhere. Alaska, Hawaii, San Diego, from Fukushima. It's still belching plutonium and uranium out into the atmosphere, into the water, all coming towards North America. And the EPA and FDA just raised the levels last year, as you know, of more than 20 different isotopes. In one case, they raised an isotope, the level they say is safe, 100,000 times what they previously said was safe. And I know I've talked about that hundreds of times on air. And I've got all this new news. But it's just things like that prove how dangerous these people are. And now they've got all the, quote, environmental eugenicists like Monbiot and others in the London Guardian and our own newspapers running around saying nuclear power is the answer and radiation is not bad for us. And Ann Coulter says it's good for us. And we need to build local nuclear power stations to power all our towns. All right. It's just seeing this reckless desire to hurt the planet and hurt humanity, and the people doing it are on a high horse calling themselves conservationists and environmentalists, lecturing everyone all day, saying pay money to these consortiums, these carbon trading companies that are publicly owned by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Ted Turner, Warren Buffett, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, heavily invested, Barack Obama, to tax us on breathing, to tax us on our gasoline, our electric power. They're setting up a post-industrial world for the general population while building compact reservations of high-tech systems. And they're hurting our military, letting them use the depleted uranium. And they just don't care. And so I'm saying, what's coming next? They know DU's a death sentence, a long, painful death sentence for military that uses it, not just those that have it used on them. The system knows that 9 out of 10 reactors are leaking because they're old and rotting. They just don't care. Their answer is, let them eat cake. They put radioactive isotopes in the so-called fluoride compounds, mined out of sulfate mines, into the water. I mean, this is so beyond any science fiction movie I could ever imagine. And then I see some of the general public, and they really think I'm crazy. And I guess in a way I am. I've used this analogy many times because it's one that's so true. If you or I were teleported back 1,000 years ago to the heyday of the Aztec kingdom in central Mexico, to where Mexico City is today, and they were sacrificing people every hour on the hour, sometimes thousands a day. Sun comes up, kill a few people. Sun goes down, kill a few people. The priest class made their money off then hanging the human bodies in the square and selling them for meat. If you, to other humans, if you were to teleport yourself back and you'd studied as an anthropologist the Mayan dialect, and you could communicate to that Mayan culture dominated by the Aztecs, part of the Mayan culture. And you said, this is wrong to chop people's hearts out and sell their flesh. It's wrong to torture yourselves. The priest class on a routine basis would take hallucinogens and take big, long pieces of yarn with pieces of glass in it and draw it through their genitals to have hallucinations of pain, worshiping skull and snake gods. I mean, this is beyond Hellraiser. This is real Hellraiser stuff, putting hooks in themselves, all of this. They would look at you and say, you are crazy. And all of them would laugh at you, see? So you would be insane. If you could teleport yourself back 70-something years to a Nazi extermination camp where they were running people into pits and shooting them, and you said, don't do that. You know, if you could speak German, don't do that. It's wrong to kill these people. It's wrong to be shooting women holding babies who you've stripped down naked in these pits. They would look at you and just arrest him and kill him. And so I'm going to admit it. I am crazy. I am. Compared to the average person, you know, I talked some about this the other day because one of my employees, separate from something going on at my office, got picked up in a FBI dragnet because he did some webmaster work for some bar owners, and I've started to look at the case, like it's all a setup here locally. And in the meeting, you know, it was basically all about how I'm crazy and this is all just my opinion. And so they wanted to make it about Alex Jones. And I can understand for people like that that would spend 8 years or more of college so they could become an FBI agent. It doesn't matter if a federal court just ruled yesterday that the FBI is covering up government involvement in Oklahoma City. I have that in the newspapers out of Salt Lake. It doesn't matter if I have their own memos that have been released by courts and that we know that the feds were running those attacks. Those guys aren't going to ever believe that could be real because that upsets their whole world. And that's why corruption can grow to this level, is because everybody thinks they've got a stake in the system, so they defend it because it couldn't be real. Really, Fast and Furious couldn't be real? All confirmed. I told you a year and 3 months ago that it was about narcotics trafficking and shipping guns into Mexico and to gangs around the U.S. to control the drug trade, not about just some guns sold out of some shops to track them. That was the cover. That's all admitted. I told you it would be used to blame the Second Amendment because I already had speeches by the Attorney General talking about the program before the full details came out. He was just saying, oh, we got a program to track guns, showing that he knew the program was there. Of course he knew. He ordered it. It's come out. But I can see why people like that don't want to admit to it. I can see that they just want to say, oh, that guy's crazy. When I have police officers on this show who were at Oklahoma City on record, heroes, who saw the feds and the bombs and all the rest of it and had the FBI come to their offices and say, you and your wife are dead if you ever talk about what you saw. I can see how little junior FBI agents that are part of the compartmentalized system sit here and think I'm crazy. And they won't even go look up what I said. Then you have Treasury agents like Joe Bannister, who finds out the IRS is a collection agency for the private Federal Reserve. He started speaking out, so they arrested him. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Let me just read over some of the news we're going to be covering today, though, after we get to a bunch of calls and all the issues and items that callers will bring up. There is a powerful article written by Paul Craig Roberts, Empires Then and Now, examples of how empires have fallen. We also have next phase of the surveillance state, nuclear-powered drones. That's from Infowars.com. The Guardian also reports U.S. draws up plans for nuclear drones. Technology is designed to increase flying time from days to months, along with power available for weapon systems. Lasers. They don't want to just use the big blimps. They're using solar and then storing it on batteries for these weapon systems. This is about playing God. And remember, who owns and runs it? J.P. Morgan Chase is at the very top of the pyramid. Rothschild, Rockefeller owned, on record. And they ordered Corzine to give them a couple billion to private bank accounts. And that's why the system hasn't indicted Corzine, who's been caught lying and caught ordering it. I mean, it's public that he ordered it. There's witnesses. The head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, all these people publicly have worked for Corzine in the past. It's total conflict of interest, crime right out in the open. The head of the CME group has come out and said, of course, Corzine ordered it. His people were there and witnessed him ordering it, and he hasn't gotten in trouble. Now, he might end up dying, or he might end up doing a deal to serve a few years as the scapegoat. But as Max Kaiser pointed out, this is J.P. Morgan Chase that gave the order. And that's why nothing's happened, because they're above the law. So I go from nuclear-powered drones to these people because that's who's running it. People like John Corzine, who make 40-to-1 bets with people's private bank accounts, and then is ordered by the Mafia Don, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, to get the money or else, and does it, and then no one gets in trouble. And that's why you're seeing the elite get crazy and say, well, put little nuclear power plants in aircraft, put them in satellites. And all the scientists say, but if that ever comes back into the atmosphere, which most satellites do, it's going to melt down and explode and rain down radioactive debris. And they're like, radiation's good for you. I mean, I don't believe David Icke that some of the ruling elite, I mean, I understand he believes it. I think he's a good guy. But I don't believe that they are really, these shape-shifting interdimensional creatures. The Bible says, demons and devils are at the top of the hierarchy. So I can see that, religions have said this too. A lot of the elite believe that. That's what my Secrets of Prometheus film leaked, breaks down. Perhaps I'll cover it more later if I have time. But at a certain point, it would be easier to believe that off-world creatures that love GMO and love radiation were doing this. Because the radiation levels doubled during nuclear testing in Chernobyl in the northern hemisphere of the Earth. And now they've more than doubled again. And cancer is just off the chart. I mean, we're dying. I think in the final equation, that's what I'm here to tell you. We're being slow killed right now. The numbers are all there. It's 100% fact. And I'm not in some type of hate fest with even the minions of this system, because they don't know what they're doing. It's like Christ said, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. I know that if the minions of this system knew what they were part of, there's no way they'd go along with this. They're wrecking this beautiful, wonderful world we've got. There's so much beauty, so much innocence, so much good in the world. People always say, why don't you be more positive? There's a lot of good stuff in this world. You got it good, Alex. Yeah, I know I got it good, because my forebears demanded liberty and freedom. They weren't perfect, but they demanded liberty and freedom, and so it created all this prosperity. I'm trying to keep it good. And the evil is growing and growing and growing and growing like a cancer. And I just want people to recognize it and to stand against it. That's all I'm trying to do. And I don't even think I do the best job. Just let me be clear about that. But this is about, what are you going to do? This is about, what are you going to stand for? Because we're in a time of great danger. All right, your calls straight ahead on the other side, and incredible news on a host of fronts. Stay with us. All right, I've just been ruminating, cogitating on air about my personal life, because I'm just thinking aloud here, and I'm asking you, what are you thinking about the future of our society and where it's going? I mentioned Joe Bannister going to break at the end of the second segment. Treasury agent who found out that the IRS was a collection agency for the private Federal Reserve, spoke out against it, and they tried to put him in jail for his free speech, and then a jury found him not guilty. But this is the type of system we're dealing with. And the establishment is trying to find more and more bad apples who will selectively enforce laws and then also persecute and go after good people who just get off on what they believe is winning, the raw exercise of power. I mean, I know there are good FBI agents. I know there are good Treasury agents. I know there are good federal marshals because I've been sent government documents. I've been sent things by good people. When I talked about Dr. Eric Pianka saying soon the airborne Ebola will be released and 90% will die and he and his family are ready to die and he's over the biology department at UT, I said something needs to be done. The FBI, if you have any decency, needs to go talk to him today. The FBI went that day within 2 hours of me saying that on air and questioned Pianka. And so obviously I know that there are good people in government. But I'm telling you, this is only going to get crazier and crazier and crazier until we start to really recognize that serious corruption is above us. The reason I mentioned Joe Bannister, we didn't have any guests lined up today because I wanted to just take calls. And I mentioned Joe Bannister, and he called in. If it is him, I'll recognize his voice instantly and said, this is Joe Bannister. And in fact, I was thinking just last week about trying to get Joe back on. I was thinking about some of the guests that we had on years ago that we've never had on in a while. I guess I had him in studio a few years ago, Joe Bannister. So I definitely want to get him, maybe even on the nightly news tonight, if he can do it. I've now extended that invitation during the break to him via John up there in Minnesota, who takes the calls and then relays them down here to Texas. So we'll find out if he can do that. And then I'll get to Reverend Bruce, Robin, Sasha, Martin, and many others that are holding. And then I'll get into, speaking of selective enforcement, Judicial Watch has gotten documents. Department of Homeland Security to grant illegal aliens unlawful presence waivers officially. So it's like Obama launching wars without congressional approval or saying he'll kill U.S. citizens if he wants to. He says, I'll shut down power plants without a law. Well, now they're going to issue the illegal aliens unlawful presence waivers, but then deport for no reason people that are here legally and lawfully if they want to. See, they want all these laws on the books so they can selectively enforce them. So we'll be getting into that. Supreme Court ruling allows strip search for any arrest. I was talking last night to the crew about people now being arrested for no seatbelt just to get you into the system. And I found out 2 people in my office have been arrested in the last year for not wearing a seatbelt. And now you get strip searched. And now they're talking about taking blood. Again, the prisons are full of nonviolent people. Full. And then that's why they're releasing the violent offenders. Did you know if you look at the actuaries, a violent offender doesn't spend as much time on average as a nonviolent? Because they don't make good prisoners. They want to put them back out there to cause the crime so the public needs the system. But enough from me. Joe Bannister, we haven't talked in a couple of years. If this is Joe, is that really Joe?
Hey, Alex, it really is me. How are you?
Oh, yeah, that's you. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Great. Well, you know, you probably know I'm a big fan, and I listen all the time. And I was listening this morning. I was actually shaving. You know, I'm on Pacific time. And thought I better clean up for the day. And, of course, I listened to your show, and you were talking about the, disappointment that all these FBI agents and feds, you cause them to have to decide what is true, what they do every day for their job and what they're told to do, or what the facts show that you put out every day. And I also want to say, Alex, I've never had a chance to say this, but you're the most pro-life person probably on the planet, because you look out for the lives of all of us. And the public probably thinks of a pro-lifer as just someone who's against abortion, which you and I both are. But you're trying to preserve life for everyone, no matter what color, no matter what age, born or unborn. And I just want to say that to you.
Well, thank you. But again, all I'm trying to do is just like you're trying to do is we do the moral thing because we love God and that's our conscience. But if you analyze it, it makes sense. If you want everybody to get a fair shake and for there to be real justice and security because you want your children to have a future. I mean, it's really elementary.
Exactly. I mean, that was what motivated me to look into the tax issues. And I know that's what motivates you. It's really about a care and concern for our own families and realizing that our neighbors and our friends, they have families too. And it's really all about caring about your fellow man, loving your neighbor as yourself. And I can totally see that in you. And I just wish that more law enforcement people and federal agents would recognize that that's the motivation that we have. And that's the sole motivation.
Let me ask you a couple questions. A, every time there's an excuse for the FBI to contact us about death threats on a message board, and so they ask me about the Obama deception, ask my employees about it, and start calling people randomly. Or one of my crew works somewhere else where they arrested the owners of a bar, and so they call them in and they're asking questions about me. I mean, should I be concerned about that? Because I know that, and of course you beat them, with a trial, that they trumped up stuff on you, a guy with no criminal record, exemplary record at the Treasury Department, an armed agent, who did the raids and all that. I mean, they tried to put you under the jail. So can you speak to that?
Well, there's definitely, you should be concerned, but ultimately, I'm sure you're much like me in that, your parents raised you to be a good guy, and not that we're perfect, but you run every day of your life knowing that God's watching what you're doing, and you try to be a moral person. So I think in terms of that, I don't think you have anything to worry about. But
no, exactly. I mean, specifically, tell folks briefly what happened to you. I mean, this was in the San Francisco Chronicle. This was on record. They've repeatedly tried to put you in jail for your free speech. Tell folks about that.
Well, basically, the criminal part of the trial, I had a client who he had already paid his income tax money in, and he wanted to ask for a refund. And so
you're a CPA, for those that don't know, to interrupt. You're a CPA. Go ahead.
Well, actually, not anymore, thanks to the IRS.
Okay.
I was for 15 years. But basically, this client wanted to follow the rule book to ask for his money back. And so he asked me, well, how do I find out where the rule book is and what are the rules? So we followed that rule book to the letter, and the IRS turned that into a conspiracy to defraud the United States of America and claimed that these income tax returns that we filed to start this refund process were false. And they turned it into 4 felony counts that would have put me in prison for probably 3 to 5 years. Well, thankfully, one of the rights we still have is a right to a jury trial, and the government presented all of their evidence, and I didn't even testify in the trial. There was really no need to, because the government couldn't find any evidence that there was, I had done anything wrong, that we didn't follow the IRS rule book, or that we put anything false on these amended tax returns. And so the jury, I find out later after talking to the jury, they're looking at each other like, why are we here? Here this IRS has gone through this big, long investigation, and they're prosecuting this guy, but they have all their star witnesses come up on the witness stand, and they can't testify that there was ever any conspiracy, that there's anything false on these tax returns. So it was a big joke. But meanwhile, they indicted me and wanted to try to put me in prison. So basically throwing everything up on the wall and hoping that something stuck, and nothing stuck.
Well, let me bring this up to you, because you worked for years with the FBI, federal marshals, as a Treasury agent, on these raids, these investigations. I, at my core, now know what the term God-fearing is. But, I mean, my conscience, if I was setting somebody up who was innocent, especially, if I knew somebody was a child killer and I set them up, I would feel bad and wouldn't do it. But setting up innocent people literally sends chills up my spine thinking about it. And I mean, it just sounds like the worst bad luck, to use a term, that I could imagine. I would never do that. And then I see all these cases of people being set up, them trying to set you up. They knew you hadn't done anything. I mean, how do they sleep at night? Trying to put people in horrible, tuberculosis-filled dungeons for no reason.
Well, I think, Laux, the biggest problem is the hierarchy of these agencies, okay? The actual agents are just working people just like you and me, but they need the job. And meanwhile, the people up the chain of command who are even less accountable are the ones that are willing to do more dirty deeds because they have more to lose, or at least they think they do. They're making, a couple $100,000 a year. They're, big in management. They're getting all kinds of perks. And when they're told to do something, they just do it. And like you mentioned all the time, there's so much compartmentalization in the federal government that those who want to orchestrate from the top can make everyone do their little deed, and it doesn't seem so dirty to the individual agent. But when you put it all together, they're messing with people's lives and their livelihoods and their freedom.
Sure. I mean, how did the Army, and I later learned the guy was with the Army, have somebody, when I'm trying to cover an event in Florida, jump out and start lighting fires to blame me for it? I mean, that shows a level, and I had to, of course, stomp it out and then restrain the person who then ran off into the night. And Mike Hansen witnessed all of this. It just shows a level of craziness in the elite that is getting more and more. If you look at the criminology, which I know you've studied, an example of like serial killers get more and more reckless because they want to be caught at a subconscious level. That's why criminals brag. But what do you make of the fact that now the choice is getting more and more obvious, where Corzine can steal billions of dollars, lie in front of Congress, be caught red-handed in all his memos and orders and wire transfers, and doesn't get in trouble? Prudential for now 13 years, and a bunch of other insurance companies takes the death benefits of dead troops when they die because they made a deal with the government so they could do it. It's like the government said, we can steal because they're crooks too, as if that makes it okay. And now it's a larger conspiracy. Now we've got Fast and Furious, which if you actually read the federal court cases where this came out, it's government bringing in drugs, it's guns to gangs in the U.S., not just Mexico, gangs in Honduras. I mean, this is a Iran-Contra deal. Now that it's all so obvious, what effect do you think that's having in the federal government? Is that making just the good people leave so that nothing but bad people then will stay? Or what's the process? Is there anything good coming out of this?
Oh, I think a tremendous amount. It's just we're not seeing it. I mean, I've been told that agents that I used to work with, agents around the Bay Area, where I was assigned, so I do have a lot of support, but they just don't have the courage to actually speak up about it. And so I think that's at least a step in the right direction. I think also that what you put out is so factual and so real that it's going to have an effect. It's just you're chipping away, and eventually it's going to take a while for the dam to break. And the question is, as you've said often, this is a sprint to the finish line between the New World Order and the good people who just want to be free, and who's going to get there first. And we need law enforcement people to take those risks and risk their life, their sacred honor for these kinds of issues, because literally our own lives are at stake. I mean, when they're poisoning our water, they're poisoning our air, that affects federal agent or non-federal agent just the same. We can all die of cancer and bone maladies and all kinds of things from the same poison. So it's time to wake up and speak up. Do it in a prudential way. Have prudence and don't do things half-cocked. But nevertheless, speak up.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem is I do so much media that I do some half-cocked stuff. And that's my only frustration. And I keep talking about myself because I'm trying to self-analyze and be a better person because of the responsibility I have. It's just that I can feel it and see it all coming to a head. I mean, has Fast and Furious woken up people? Because, I mean, I've seen that really wake people up.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, back, and you, of course, were much more involved in the Waco investigation than I was, but I was still a special agent in the IRS, and we went to see rules of engagement. And I remember going with a few pro-gun friends who still stayed friends with me, even though I was an IRS special agent, and a handful of IRS special agents. We went to the showing of rules of engagement together. So even when I was an agent, I was awake to what was going on and even trying to awaken others. But I know at least one guy in that group who went to see rules of engagement, and he's still up in the upper hierarchy of the IRS CID management. So whatever he saw that day, he's somehow able to dismiss in his mind and still somehow sleep at night.
Well, I'm glad that people are starting to wake up. And what's most important is that people make a choice. And it doesn't mean that everything I say is completely accurate, because I make mistakes, or that everything anybody says is completely accurate. But we know that our basic liberties are being trashed. I mean, now in England, which is just a few years ahead of us, they just announced everything is recorded. We're listening to everything. I mean, that's in the news now. They went from denying it to, yeah, we're listening to everything you're doing. Get used to it. We're recording everything. And now they're going, yeah, we're spying on you here. And yeah, the CIA director says the CIA is domestically operating, and that there's, you know, built-in devices to spy on you, and you're in the new clock radios and dishwashers. So really what I see is the world is getting its choice right now. And the same things that are happening here are happening across the globe. I'm going to take a ton of calls coming up in the next segment and throughout the next hour and get into all this news. But, Joe, I know I'm springing this on you on short notice because I've been meaning to get you on the show. If you can't do it today, maybe later in the week or next week. But are you available to do the nightly news at, say, I know you're a busy guy at...
No, don't even, Alex, I'd be honored, and I'll get all spoofed up here and get ready to go, and I'll be happy to, and I appreciate you taking my call, and I appreciate all that you do.
Are you kidding? Now, that'll be 12:30. We'll tape that, and then I'll do the news later, but then we usually do the interview early in the day. So 12:30 Pacific's good for you, Joe?
That'd be totally fine, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to make sure, because I know we've got a bunch of numbers, but I want to make sure we've got the accurate number, and I want to make sure we have your Skype ID if you have that for the nightly news. There goes Joe Bannister. Talk about a man of courage going way up the ranks. Treasury Department. Here's a radio show saying the IRS collects for the private Federal Reserve. Didn't believe it, set out to disprove it, found that it was true, spoke out, got arrested. See, I intended to take a bunch of calls, and then we get Joe Bannister calling in, but this little segment and the whole next hour, it is going to be phone calls, phone calls, phone calls. In the third hour, I've got a bunch of special news reports I want to go over and analyze, and a lot more. But speaking of lawlessness in government, guys, put that Washington Post back on screen. Radio listeners, if you just type in Homeland Security Department has the lowest morale ever, you will get the Washington Post. And the headline is, low morale at Homeland Security is focus of congressional hearing. And that, of course, is all the agencies that are under Homeland Security. And why do they have low morale? They're getting record pay because they know this country is falling apart, and they know there's corruption going on, and they know people like Corzine and Obama are above the law. Illegal aliens are given waivers. I remember 5 years ago, Bush was doing this, and then Obama continued it, that they would do fake raids on meatpacking plants and stuff just to get the fines on the company and arrest the owners. And then they would take the illegals to a facility and give them green cards on the spot. And in some cases, use them for federal construction projects. And you know the feds aren't getting in trouble using illegals. And again, you cannot have this selective enforcement stuff. Here it is, DHS to grant illegal aliens unlawful presence waivers. Let's go to your phone calls right now. Robin, and then Reverend, and then Sasha, Martin. We'll get to all of you. Robin in Arizona, you're on the air. Welcome.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Could you take my number and have a call?
No, ma'am. I probably am not going to have time to call you back because you called here. Did you want to talk on air?
Yeah, I do, about the Arizona. What do they exactly mean by that? I mean, if you say one word, they can come after you.
Well, that's the kind of crazy stuff. In fact, guys, I had it in yesterday's stack. Will you reprint me our article, by the way, got on drugsreport.com. So we got a lot of attention. We appreciate Drudge doing that because it's important, obviously. I wish the media would report on it. Arizona passed a law saying that you can have criminal charges on you of basically stalking and bullying. It's a copy of the cyberbullying legislation that the ADL wants that kills the First Amendment. And it just says cuss words or disparaging remarks. I just mentioned the cuss word part of the bill. It says disparaging remarks. And, of course, I don't like the troll culture on the Internet. It's a culture of cowards that ruin the Internet where they can act like big men and call people names and say I'm a murderer and all this stuff. But that's because they're little cowards. They never come up and say that to my face. Okay? So you don't want to let them spoil everybody's First Amendment. And so, yes, ma'am, you can go read the article at Infowars.com. In fact, I'll dig up the headline for you here in a moment. I can't remember the exact headline, and it has a link to the bill. And it's basically the Cyberbullying Act at a state level. There it is. Arizona passes sweeping internet censorship bill legislation to make it illegal to use offensive language. And so not just cuss words. It goes on in the language to say disparaging. That's what Europe's doing. They say, well, if you've got free speech, but if it hurts someone's feelings, well, now you're going to get arrested. I mean, they actually arrest you in Europe. Canada is now arresting preachers that read anti-homosexual passages. And again, whether you're for that or against it, it's the free speech that's been guaranteed by Magna Carta 1215. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I've been following you for 2 years. I love your show. I've been trying to call you every day for about 2 years. So thanks for getting me today.
Well, thank you. And I wasn't trying to be rude saying I can't call you back. I need to go call my grandma back, and I need to call my wife back. I just have no time. God bless you, ma'am. All right, more calls and a ton of news straight ahead. Second hour.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done's been right.
All right, into hour number 2. And I'm glad the last caller brought up this article because later I will get into it more. I barely mentioned it yesterday, and I did something that I do a lot, and I apologize for it. Instead of exaggerating what's going on, as people seem to think I do sometimes, and certainly that does happen occasionally, everybody's guilty of hyperbole. Normally things are worse than I said. And reading over the legislation that Arizona passed, it doesn't just say cuss words. So I've been saying, if you cuss online, they can arrest you. That's not what it is. It's the Cyberbullying Act. It says any offensive language, anything disparaging or hurtful. I mean, just totally unconstitutional. And let me tell you, if the Supreme Court throws out Obamacare, I get a little more hope. They did rule the Second Amendment's individual right. But it's a battle of ideas. We've got to be out there stating the facts against the lies. When these globalists come out and say arrest people that don't agree with global warming being man-made or put us in psychiatric wards, shout them down. Say, hey, you don't try to arrest me for my speech. You're a tyrant. I want you to have your speech, but don't you call for my arrest. That's treasonous. That's dangerous. That's authoritarian. You shut up. Because let me tell you, I'm for all speech until somebody says get rid of somebody's speech. So you go ahead, you talk as much as you want, but I'm going to be screaming right back in your face. Sasha in Nevada, you're on the air. Thanks for holding. Welcome.
Hi, Alex. Okay, 1 minute. I'm an old school hacker. I worked for Bill Gates. I go way, way back on all of this stuff. And I really enjoy your program. You educate me every day. And I wanted to bring up something to you which you must know about. And I've sent you multiple messages and even a letter once. The message was titled, Google is laughing at you. You talk about the NDAA. You talk about Google and Facebook's relationships with the CIA, all that kind of stuff. Mike Adams had an article about how buying storable foods can put you on a watch list. And I just wanted to talk about the problem that about this Google Analytics and how it's basically Google owns the Internet and how everybody is complicit in this, including InfoWars. You guys include this Google Analytics spyware on your website, and I know it provides a lot of useful statistics and stuff, but it also allows Google to run code on all the users' machines, which could pretty much do anything, including turning on your webcam or...
Sure, if you don't block it. Look, looking at this, we choose to attack Apple for what it does, but I own an iPhone. We choose to assail Google to tell them to stop accessing computers without authorization, which they've been caught doing. I'm no hacker like you. I just read what the experts say. And I've had big debates around here. We would not be able to, it's like we're going into the matrix. People say, why do you use, I'll hold you over because you kind of disagree. And I think you're making a pertinent point. And it's a decision here. Either we're going to be in the matrix and fight in the matrix, or I can sit outside the matrix, but the people I want to reach aren't in the matrix. Do you see the point I'm making?
Absolutely. That's true, and you have to be on the internet, and that's true, but I think that I wanted to start a movement. Like, I was inspired by one of your callers to put up, got everybody to get off of the registration service from GoDaddy because they were supporting SOPA. And this is in doing this, I wrote a little software product to block this. And as part of that, I researched this, and I went ahead and loaded the top 1 million websites on Alexa. And it was shocking to me, and this has really blew my mind, and I'm in this area.
Well, stay there. I'm going to give you the floor for a few minutes when we get back to break down how this works, what's going on, and how everybody just gives Google access to their site. And so then Google is able to basically track and control the web. My issue is I'm now using the Google system two ways to expose what they're doing, but I have to be interfaced with it to do it. But explain to me how I can get around that when we come back. We're talking to Sasha in Nevada, who says he's a hacker and wants to point out some of the things that are going on the internet. Speaking of the internet, because callers have been calling in about this, we mentioned this yesterday, our article, and it got a lot of circulation on the internet. Arizona passes sweeping internet censorship bill, legislation to make it illegal to use offensive language online. The state legislature of Arizona has passed a bill that vastly broadens telephone harassment laws and applies them to the internet and other means of electronic communication. The law, which is being pushed under the guise of an anti-bullying campaign, would mean that anything communicated or published online that was deemed to be offensive by the state, including editorials, illustrations, and even satire, could be criminally punished. And it's passed out of one side. It hasn't fully passed yet, so that's good. Again, I tend to condense info down when I'm taking calls or hurry up and get to the next person, and I was saying it had passed. It's only passed one side. It hasn't passed the full legislature. The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund breaks down the Arizona House Bill 2549. The bill is sweepingly broad and would make it a crime to communicate via electronic means speech that is intended to annoy, offend, harass, terrify, as well as certain sexual speech. Because the bill is not limited to one communications, HB 2549 would apply to the internet as a whole, thus criminalizing all manner of writing, cartoons, and other protected material the state finds offensive or annoying. So you go to a website and you don't like what you're seeing, and you go file something and they come after you, and it goes on from there. And it's basically word for word. I've looked at the bill. The Cyberbullying Act does exactly what Congress has been trying to pass. Every time some poor kid commits suicide because people are being mean to them online, they say, oh, we got to criminalize speech for everybody. Number one, why are the parents letting all their kids do this? Why are you letting your children on the internet when they're 12 years old? Why do you have them in public schools? Why do you subject them to this dead culture? I mean, I've said it. You'd be better to your kids not even know how to read or write, but to know how to work on a car or clean out a garage or paint than, I mean, all these people have college degrees now, and they can't even get a job. And the illegal aliens are driving around in brand new cars, living in nice houses because they know what makes money. The old carpentry, things like that. And I'm not saying college is worthless, but it's close to worthless with a lot of the different degrees because it costs too much. You're not going to get enough money out of that degree because the jobs don't exist because we've been deindustrialized. The high-skilled jobs, there's maybe a third of what there was in the 70s. That's a conservative estimate. I'm going to shut up now. It's just all of this ties together. Now, Sasha in Nevada called in during the last segment, if you missed it, and just recap that. So you're a good, great computer person, work for Bill Gates, and you're pointing out that Google is laughing at us, and you've sent us articles about this. Send it to us again, and I'll try to do a search on it and maybe even post what you have to say. I know what you're saying is true, and I was explaining why we use Google Analytics and things. It's because we can interface with the matrix. Just like I said, I use an iPhone, but I talk about how they should change their labor practices and pay people enough so they don't commit suicide. And they now are doing that. So all of this tech is built the same way. All of it is immoral. So I use it as a hypocrite, but the excuse is I can shoot videos on that driving down the road that'll be seen by 1 million people or more, criticizing it and pointing out, by the way, I'm using an iPhone. I'm a hypocrite. But by the way, they should charge you, $5 more for an iPhone, and that would actually raise those people's standard of living. But the globalists don't want that. I mean, Al Gore runs Apple. What do you expect? He's a monstrous person. He owns oil companies that literally are the #1 company chopping down rainforest on record. Occidental, just vicious. And then lectures you all day to pay him carbon tax money through his carbon consortium. I see idiots send me emails. They go, or comments all the time, we'll pay our carbon taxes to Al Gore. Oh, yeah? You are ignorant. See, people realize that's crazy to pay Al Gore money. So it's like, oh, that can't be true. That he doesn't run an oil company. Oh, actually, he does. Wow, Alex is right. Oh, you don't pay your carbon taxes to him. Yeah, you do. The Chicago Exchange, he's a big part of that. Gore and Blood, I'm not joking. It's called Gore and Blood. Or is it Blood and Gore? No, it's Gore and Blood. Guys, Google Gore and Blood, carbon trading, London, England. It's the big exchange. The Rothschild front in the city of London, in London, is called Gore and Blood. That's his company. It's not a pun, Gore and Blood, Blood and Gore. It's called Blood and Gore, or Gore and Blood. It's Gore and Blood carbon trading. It's a big company, and they make you buy it. I mean, you literally pay him that money. Side issue. The caller is bringing up a very central point, and we've had debates about it. For a while, I just had Google turned on the back end. They couldn't track everything, my IT folks told me with that, but that way I could see what we're reaching and what we're doing. Very valuable information. But when you go to the Oracle and tell it what you want to know, it now knows what you are thinking. And it's the same thing. It's like in Lord of the Rings, I love to use it as an analogy, where there's an article, Blood and Gore, the nickname for Al Gore's carbon trading firm that is poised to make billions of dollars from carbon credits. And yeah, it's the nickname because the principal is what, Lord Blood and then Al Gore. You can look it up. Side issue. Continuing here, and actually find their website, is what I'm saying. That Gandalf's telling them, don't look into that crystal. And they're like, but I can see what's going on in faraway lands. And he said, yeah, but Sauron or Saruman can also look right back through. You never know who's watching. Throw the bag over it. People used to come to my house over a decade ago and laugh at me that I'd covered up cameras on computers and stuff. And they're like, oh, they're watching you. Now they admit they are. So I get what the caller is saying. It's just that then you should turn Google cookies off, which I do at my house. And then Google got caught breaking through those. So does Microsoft. I know. So you can either unplug from it all or use it to crush the enemy. I believe that these things go two ways. You understand that? Now, I can barely turn a computer on. I just read what all the experts say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha, and tell us your big idea on a piece of code you've written, and then others can write similar code that can really expose these people. You've got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, before that, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds, and I didn't mean to beat you up on this.
No. I need to, hold on. I need to be beat up because, but I need to be beat up so I can show and say where I stand on this because we've had these discussions. No one's just ever brought it up to me. So I want you to know where I stand, part of total transparency, but go ahead.
Yeah, let me take another example. Let's say you go to AlJazeera.com, and who's operated by a foreign group and so forth. You go there and you're reading an article about U.S. government spying. Well, the fact is that on that article there on Al Jazeera, they're including Google, Facebook, and Twitter code on there. Now, it can be implemented in different ways, but the way that it works, that where people commonly put the Facebook like button on their pages, they include a block of code from Facebook that draws that button. Well, that block of code that draws that button also goes ahead and communicates all your personal information. The fact that you've read there even can log your keystrokes and turn on your camera and all that you said. Well, actually, the Facebook one can't, but the Google one can. And let's then back to your site. That you include Google Analytics, and yes, that's a lot of useful information, but I would argue that that's not necessary at all for your end users. And if you just didn't include that code, you're complicit in running this code for Google. If this code wasn't on your site, then it wouldn't be able to be tracked. And
I understand. You were saying you did, the top sites on Alexa and found most of them have it, right?
I took and loaded 1 million websites. I know it's the largest study to date. I know that the largest study beyond that, and I'll write an article for that, and probably it'll be in the Wall Street Journal. It'd be great if you guys could write the article. I'll send you all the data. But I loaded the top 1 million websites, and of those 1 million websites, 700,000 of the top 1 million websites are including Google Analytics, or maybe 75% of them are including Google, Facebook, or Twitter, all three of the code that they run for other people. And I would say that the solution there's a solution for the end user and there's a solution for the webmaster. I was thinking about more of the webmaster side. The solution for the end user is there are solutions. None of them really completely work. But,
well, listen, we've tried. That's what I'm saying. They've built the architecture where you pretty much need this. So explain to me how we do it without it and can still interface and effectively fight the globalist. Explain how we do that, and we will do it. Yeah, I mean, you've got my absolute word on that. If we can find a solution, we are waging war against these people. We are exposing them. I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. It's just that take the ad company we were using for the software to display ads. Google then bought that. I mean, the problem is many times we're using something that isn't spying on people, and Google comes and buys it. So it's like whack-a-mole. And I don't have that much money. I don't have that big of an IT team. And so we're just constantly just trying to keep the sites up and working. And it's all a process, but I absolutely hear what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying too. Specifically to Google Analytics, it would take more work, but you don't need to run it. You can get those same statistics without it. As far as YouTube and using YouTube, yes, go ahead and use it. That's a great using their tool against them, and that's the best way to get the information out there. As far as the Facebook button.
Well, hold on. Stay there. We're going to have to come back and then we'll get to other callers, but I want you to finish up. You said you have a plan. You should have a piece of software. I want to hear about that. Stay there. Wow, I was talking to Sasha during the break, and he was telling me some of the stuff he's up to. And I've gotten a pretty good gauge on callers over the years. He sounds like a pretty credible guy. And he's certainly doing some pretty interesting stuff. Let me tell you, the really good computer programmers, hackers out there, are one of the best things we've got going for us, and most of them love liberty. Because when you're intelligent, you love liberty. That's one of the prerequisites. Of course, there's evil people that who are also intelligent, but that's a minority. It's just good people tend to never actually stand up to the corrupt, and it's only when we actually see it as our job to stand up and crush the corrupt that we start seeing real movement. And the globalists are experts at also co-opting people that are intelligent. But finishing up your point, in the next few days, you're going to send me this article that you're putting together, and we'll put it on Infowars.com after we go over it some. Finish up any other points you wanted to make.
No, that's great, Alex. The only thing I would say is that one of the things I'm a little disheartened about is that it seems that with the fact that Google has basically got their code on every single website, so it doesn't matter what article you're reading on what site it's there. I think what the real solution is that at some point somebody needs to form another internet, a second internet, one that's kind of it could run on top of the current internet, because if somebody pulls the plug on the internet, information sources like yours and so forth could just be turned off overnight. And I know that, you worry about these things too. And so there needs to be another solution so that, we have some like CB radio sideband equivalent of an internet so that information can still get out if it gets to that point.
Sure. Well, Google is clearly a government construction, an elitist construction. Now at the Bilderberg Group, Google is right up there at the top because they understand that they're taking over the entire economy and infrastructure with a system with built-in backdoors and Trojan horses to absolutely control all information, and as Google now admits, try to predict the future. So this is an attempt to create an information singularity or an omnipresent awareness, or at least a dim counterfeit of that, and it's very, very serious. Look forward to that email. Thank you so much. Okay, now I will try to hurry through calls. It's just that these callers are always so good. We got a bunch of news coming up, too. Reverend Bruce in New York, welcome to the airwaves.
Finally. God bless you. I have a couple of comments to make about Obama's background, and then I want to briefly ask you about the Bilderberg meeting. But before that, I just want to say, at the end of the day, I don't care what the devil is doing, what his people are doing, God has the last say, and he is in control. And on that note, concerning Obama's background, prior to Obama being elected to office, I don't remember the gentleman's name. He was being interviewed, and he had a lot of information on Obama. He did a great amount of investigation. That's one of the reasons why I didn't vote for Obama. What he had said was concerning Obama's family in Kenya, that they had a background that were originally Arabs. They were Arabs. They came into Kenya, and they held the current government hijacked, took over the Kenyan government.
No, that's Webster Tarpley, and he's written 2 books on Obama. That's all true. That's all true about Obama and Odinga. And they used a Muslim-Christian war to get Odinga in a new position. They created the prime ministership. And so, yes, that's what Obama did.
Not only that, Michelle encouraged Obama to become a Christian so he would be more electable to become president or to get into office. So he was not a Christian. He became a Christian just for electability. Also, there was an article online that a gentleman wrote who went to a dinner, a supper over in Russia. And there was a woman who was a communist that told him all about Obama, his rearing, and who he would be back in the 80s. She educated him on this black man who would run and become president, that he is a communist, and they're waiting for him. And she gave a whole lot of details about Obama and how he was raised to be president, and he was also a communist. He wrote a whole article. I have that on my desktop. If you want, I could email that article
Sure.
to you.
What I think's going on with Obama is he's like a multifaceted shapeshifter politically. He's all those things and has all those backgrounds, but he has CIA from the time he's born in his background. So the truth is, we don't know who Obama is. We only know that he's not who he says he is. That's 100%. He's got 3 or 4 different names. His records are all blocked. He is not who he says he is. His official story is a lie. I really enjoy it when the globalists try to poison us, and, well, we resist them via a free market system. Hello, my fellow info warriors. Alex Jones here, introducing you to the ProPure family of gravity-fed filters. Now, you know that the globalists are filling our water with radioactive isotopes, fluoride, lead, mercury, arsenic. And one of the few systems that can efficiently and economically remove or reduce down to non-detectable levels these poisons are gravity-fed filters. And ProPure is the top of the line. Their filters are impregnated with silver, a natural antibiotic. On top of that, they're bigger, so they filter faster. You don't have to prime these the first time you use them. It's amazing. Go to Infowars.com and click on the shopping cart link to see the entire family of these babies. Now, the fluoride they add to our water is so tiny that most filters can't cut it out. But ProPure has their system that will, again, reduce it to non-detectable levels, almost get all of it out of there. That's also available. And if you look at the different systems they offer, the ProPure Big Brush Finish is on a stand, so it's easier on a table or at your restaurant or wherever you have it to go up with a glass or a mug and fill it up. Then there's this big baby right here, the ProPure King large version. Got a lot of different options that come with it. Also, they have the ProPure Big, probably one of the best values out there. And of course, it's burnished stainless steel. And then what I use on my RV, something that's great for your hunting cabin or the back porch, is the ProPure Traveler. Small and portable, but packs a huge punch, cleans out all that garbage. They also have the glass sight spigot, so you don't have to take the top off and look in the bottom area to see how much water. You can see how fast it's filtering with this optional system. The globalists obviously are hitting us through our water. It's time to take control of our lives. It's time to not give our children and families these poisons, and these systems cut it down to non-detectable levels across the board. ProPure is the name. I only promote what I believe in, and I use ProPure in my home and my office. And I recommend that you check out the information on ProPure at Infowars.com. We already have the lowest price at Infowars.com on the ProPure gravity filter system. But when you add in the 10% off when InfoWarriors use the product code WATER at Infowars.com, nobody can top it. So again, it's a win-win-win. Stop drinking the poison water, checkmate the globalists when it comes to your health, and support Infowars.com and the work we're doing here. You know, many revolutionaries rob banks and things and kidnap people for funds. We promote in the free market the products we use that are about preparedness. That's how we fund this revolution against the New World Order in our move to restore our constitutional republic and a spirit of 1776 worldwide. Check it out at Infowars.com. ProPure, top of the line, #1, most powerful and effective and economical gravity-fed water system in the world. ProPure, available, discounted at Infowars.com. Don't forget product code WATER to save 10%. It's the latest generation, years in development. ProPure is the name. And I owe that great opportunity to be in the film Waking Life to Tommy Pilata, the producer of the film, and Richard Linkletter, two guys that I've gotten so busy over the years I never even get to reach out to and contact. By the way, remind me to try to call Tommy Pilata on those numbers we have again today, because the number I have for him is an old number. And Tommy called me the last time I talked to him about 3-4 months ago. I was in a UFC fight because Joe Rogan had invited me down to Houston. And, well, I was already in Houston protesting the Fed, and Joe had heard that, so he invited me over to the UFC, and Tommy called me while I was in the middle of watching the fights, and he could barely hear me, so I haven't talked to him then. I'm not name-dropping. I'm like now communicating with my old friends via the radio show, because I know he listens sometimes, and his friends do. So, Tommy, I think about you all the time. And I bet he even came to Southwest. And I always miss his phone calls or don't call him back the few times he's called. So now I'll just communicate to you here. You're awesome. What a smart guy, too. He's an amazing guy. So is Rick Linkletter. That's now what this radio show has turned into, is a public communication. You know, I want to try to break the cycle here on this radio show. It's a great radio show, very informative. But I just don't want to get up here and just bray at people, calling the New World Order criminals and calling all the different systems criminal, which is true to a great extent, but we know that. I want to try to have a calm, focused, reflective show. I tried this yesterday, and it didn't happen because I got off into brain-altering vaccines that coming towards North America. And the EPA and FDA just raised the levels last year, as you know, of more than 20 different isotopes. In one case, they raise an isotope, the level they say is safe, 100,000 times what they previously said was safe. And I know I've talked about that hundreds of times on air. And I've got all this new news. But it's just things like that prove how dangerous these people are. And now they've got all the, quote, environmental eugenicists like Monbiot and others in the London Guardian and our own newspapers running around saying nuclear power is the answer and radiation is not bad for us. And Ann Coulter says it's good for us. And we need to build local nuclear power stations to power all our towns. All right. It's just seeing this reckless desire to hurt the planet and hurt humanity, and the people doing it are on a high horse calling themselves conservationists and environmentalists, lecturing everyone all day, saying pay money to these consortiums, these carbon trading companies that are publicly owned by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Ted Turner, Warren Buffett, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, heavily invested. Barack Obama, to tax us on breathing, to tax us on our gasoline, our electric power. They're setting up a post-industrial world for the general population while building compact reservations of high-tech systems. And they're hurting our military, letting them use the depleted uranium. And they just don't care. And so I'm saying, what's coming next? They know DU's a death sentence, a long, painful death sentence for military that uses it, not just those that have it used on them. The system knows that 9 out of 10 reactors are leaking because they're old and rotting. They just don't care. Their answer is, let them eat cake. They put radioactive isotopes in the so-called fluoride compounds, mined out of sulfate mines, into the water. I mean, this is so beyond any science fiction movie I could ever imagine. And then I see some of the general public, and they really think I'm crazy. And I guess in a way I am. I've used this analogy many times because it's one that's so true. If you or I were teleported back 1,000 years ago to the heyday of the Aztec kingdom in central Mexico, to where Mexico City is today, and they were sacrificing people every hour on the hour, sometimes thousands a day. Sun comes up, kill a few people. Sun goes down, kill a few people. The priest class made their money off then hanging the human bodies in the square and selling them for meat. If you, to other humans, if you were to teleport yourself back and you'd studied as an anthropologist the Mayan dialect stuff all day and all night and then finally get on air, I get angry and frustrated because there's piles of it. And I figured out, psychoanalyzing myself, that at a subconscious level, I get so frustrated and angry by the news that then I start to basically spin out of control and just get angry and nasty. And you can't argue with success. It's just that I personally want to move more towards being calm and focused and really deliberative in what I do, instead of sometimes not being as effective because I'm in a rage. I knew this was coming for a long time. They're launching all sorts of nuclear-powered satellites now that have reactors, little systems on board that if they do ever come back into orbit or out of orbit into the atmosphere will make Chernobyl look like a health food. Now they're announcing drones to circle 24/7 that are nuclear powered. And you know they're going to crash. You know they're going to have malfunctions. It doesn't matter. The system says DU's good, Chernobyl's good, Fukushima's good. They actually say, I know I talk about this ad nauseum because it's total proof of the elite being out of their minds crazy. Radiation levels are going up everywhere. Alaska, Hawaii, San Diego, from Fukushima. It's still belching plutonium and uranium out into the atmosphere, into the water, all literally attack your tissue. And I dream of actually just calmly covering all the news. I dream of actually taking hundreds of your phone calls. And I've only attained that dream a few times because I'm always going into the same paradigm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the phones up for first-time callers, and at least in the first and second hour, then everybody in the third hour, on any subject, any question or comment. No matter how good the caller is, I'm giving them 1 minute, and then I'm giving myself 30 seconds to respond. We're going to be taking your phone calls. When we come back, I'll give you the number. Number one on the audio streams and podcasts for talk radio via many metrics like Shoutcast and others at Infowars.com, streaming video at PrisonPlanet.tv, and, of course, channel XM 166. Thank you so much for tuning in to this hour of InfoWars. I want to do something a little bit different today, and you see me struggle with this every day because there is no program director, there is no radio consultant, there is no manager over Alex Jones. And quite frankly, some days I wish there was, just because they're there to challenge you and to bounce things off of you and to point out what could be better. Because some days I hear my radio show rebroadcast, and it is the essence of powerful information and oratory skills and the incredible guest and the breaking news. There's a reason this broadcast now reaches, one way or another, over 15 million. In fact, I've got to bump that number up. Conservatively, it's more than that. 15 million people a week. But then I realized, wow, that's an incredible responsibility. And I tend to get frustrated with the information. I tend to get angry after I read this